Here I am with episode 2 of this tractor, and I realized I didn't include a before picture in episode 1. It had been sitting here several years. Apparently it was owned by the brother of the guy that I bought it from. He said that it had been getting weak, and then they just parked it. In the last video I got it running. In this video I'm going to get it driving. Let's see what it takes to do a cold start on this thing. Maybe not that much, there we go. Nothing happening there. Doesn't look like anything's happening there, maybe. The belt is still squealing pretty good. I'm gonna change the oil. It's supposed to be 6 quarts in the engine. This pan supposedly can take 6 quarts. We'll see. Hey, I had the screen still attached. Nice. Ow. I noticed that this housing isn't exactly centered on there. Maybe there's a broken bolt and a boss. That is some black oil. I wonder if anyone's ever plumbed in a T here with a petcock on one side so you can drain the oil filter housing. Had to reach in there and scoop out some sludge. With my crooked bracket, that was almost impossibly tight fit, but I got it. New gasket going in. I told myself not to do an oil change until I had a drain plug gasket, and then I totally forgot. So now I need to make a gasket. Cleaned out plug and a homemade gasket. Doesn't look like the breather comes apart, so I'm just rinsing it out. Be a good time to replace the oil pressure gauge and the proof meter. They're a little crusty. Can't get the proof meter cable to detach from the proof meter, so I'll take it apart here. It's funny how like the entire engine is perfectly greasy. On the bell housing back, it's just rust. It's like someone just painted the engine black with grease. I don't even see a cable in there. 1665.5 hours on it. I'll write that down, probably on the dash. The one mounting post was broken off, so I only needed to remove one nut. Now I gotta wiggle this whole thing out of here. I don't see a cable inside the sheath. I guess the needle was just bouncing from general vibration. Who knows how many hours are on this thing, but I'll know from now on. I just ran the new cable. Time to install this. It has a rubber ring around it that kind of seats it into the hole. Seats down in there pretty well, actually. More thumb screws. I'm gonna get that snug in there and pretty straight out so you can tighten the nut properly. All these gauges I've installed have a provision, or actually have a light to backlight the gauges. I might run a wire for that eventually. It's not a top priority right now though. I should probably clean up the whole thing, but at least I got the mating feature. There we go. I'm not a huge fan of the fact that these new nuts for this bracket are knurled round nuts. I'd rather have a hex, but maybe that's to disguise the fact that that thread is M5 by 0.8 And who wants to carry around a bunch of metric stuff when they're driving around an old Ford? I'll worry about that in a couple decades when those are rusted on there. Impulse buy late last night. I figured screw it. I'm gonna go with a 1-wire alternator. And because no job can be easy, bolt doesn't fit and bolt doesn't fit. Great. I'm just gonna drill and tap this one to use the hardware that I have. It fits. I also had this complete 12-volt wiring harness, so I'm just gonna get rid of all the crappy wires on this tractor and get it all brand new. Putting a new end on this bad boy. That looks a little better. I hooked up a battery tender pigtail. I put it on the battery side of the disconnect switch. This disconnect isn't factory, but it was on here when I got the tractor, and I like it, so I'm gonna leave it. Put a new coil to distributor wire on here. I also put that coil in its proper clamp rather than just hanging out here. Since I'm using a 12-volt coil, which is internally resisted, I bypassed this resistor. Also, there was this ground wire coming off the alternator. I guess I'll take this off to clean it up. I'm gonna take that off too. Kind of afraid of breaking off a stud or something. Kind of seems like that's what's going on with this side of the oil filter housing. I'll be careful on that one. Well, I figured I'd take the whole alternator bracket off anyway. It's gonna help me get to that resistor bolt, and I want to get some longer bolts for these. Those are barely threaded in there. That wasn't too bad. Looks like there's just a dirty hole there. Might be able to straighten this oil canister out and put the second fastener in there. The threads are actually cleaning up on this hole. I was able to fit both those fasteners on there. Once I burn all the fuel out of the tank, I'm going to reseal that joint because that's already looking pretty bad. Reinstalling the alternator bracket. How many trips to the hardware store does it take to do one task? I was going to replace the 2 short bolts on this alternator bracket, so I took it with me and bought a bolt that would fit there somewhat. Well, I needed the one that fit there, so I had to go back to the hardware store. I think that'll tighten up and it'll be just the right length. Couple issues. Looks like that boss on this alternator is a little bit shorter, so I'll have to come up with a spacer. And the top adjustment likewise is a little shorter. And this maybe factory, maybe homemade bracket, which doesn't look the greatest to begin with, is not going to allow a bolt to go straight into it. Just found this bracket while barn picking. I'm guessing it'll clear the alternator a little better, although I think it's going to be pretty much bottomed out. Existing bracket wasn't the greatest anyway. That's roughly where the bolt went, right on the broken part. That actually might work. Being a little longer in the straight section actually will give enough clearance where I don't have to grind on it. See how long of a spacer I need. That's 2 inches. That's just over 3. A little more than 5/8. So I'll try to get a 5/8 spacer there and a 1-inch spacer on the bottom. All right, I got the 1-inch spacer down there and the 5/8 spacer up here. I felt like it would get kind of cocked in this slot, so I put a washer there. Just gotta tighten them down. I actually discovered that this bracket is from a 68 to 70 Mustang or Cougar. So new wiring harness, cleaned up a bunch of stuff, new alternator. First belt I put on this thing, I used the old belt as a reference, and it's obviously way too small. I think it was just like half of the original belt is all I had. Hopefully an appropriate one would keep it from squealing. It's a little different in thickness. Hopefully this is the right size. I just found that wheel stud under the crankshaft pulley. Need to figure out what this gauge is reading. And you get new bumper. And you get new bumper. Kind of a two-handed job there. Let's see if there was a reason those were missing. Did they even do anything? Good enough. I doubt it really matters what grade of oil goes in here, just as long as there is some. So how about some oil that I found in a random person's trash? It's synthetic, so I wouldn't run it anyway. Polaris. $11. Maybe it's a mystery oil. Oh, it looks about right. I think there was just enough. It's going to end up being right at the oil level mark. Now I need to install this. I removed the wheel center while I was investigating how to remove this drum. I also removed the nut. It didn't put up a ton of a fight, but the two spots on the threads got kind of smeared, which I'm not happy about. I'm not going to pull and replace the axle just yet, so I'm going to try to touch up those threads and maybe use a special repair nut that I've seen online. I mean, it was bound to happen whenever I wanted to take that nut off. Kicking myself for doing that now when I didn't need to. I just need to take these screws off to take the drum off. I'm going to run this 1¼ 18, try to clean up the threads. Not perfect, but I think there's enough there for a nut. Hot diggity damn. I also noticed there's at least one broken something right here. There's a nut on the other two, and there's a broken stud or bolt here, and then probably the same story down here. Something's missing there, maybe. I didn't want to have to go medieval on it, but that's what it took. That pile of rust came out of the drum when it fell off, but there was just a mountain of rust forming under it as I was doing this. Kind of a shame. Is this some sort of seal? There is a ton of rust in here. Yeah, this looks like a big seal. Cool. Hey. Axle's not seized. Interesting. Yeah, I had to clobber this thing. I'm going to take a grinder and clean this up. But hey, that's what I wanted to see right there. There was no adjusting this from the outside. This thing is solid. Shoes don't look terrible. Let's see if I can clean up some of this. Put it on its handy holder. Now I can investigate these two broken studs. And yep, let's replace those two. Now it rotates. Could take the hub off now. It seems like it always happens this way, where I'm doing a little bit of work here and there, kind of don't film one of the instances, and that's when the action happens. That hub popped off there pretty hard. It was kind of cool. Now I can clean it up, replace those two broken studs, probably also replace that seal while I'm here. So I guess taking that nut off wasn't in vain, although it could have been done better. Might as well take the seal retainer off just so I can clean up the whole area better. So I guess these two on the back are just to hold the backing plate on. What would that piece be from? There's a big spot of rust right there, right there. Well, I didn't mean to get this far. That's almost too easy. The race looks pretty good. Oh, now it turns just fine. Wow. Trying to loosen that, I punched myself in the face like 10 times. I'm guessing it was stuck in roughly this area where there's the most damage. The old Fomoco logo. On Model A rear ends, you shim the bearing axle preload with some paper gaskets on the pinion. Here it looks like you do it with metal gaskets on the backing plate area where the bearing is. This thing must have been full of water at one point. It is so pitted. Get pitted. There was one of the metal gaskets on this side and the other three were on the inside. Looks like these shims are about 11th thou thick. 3 of the 4 were 11th thou thick. This one's about 17. One of the 11s is on the inside. 2 of the 11s plus this were on the outside. So that's about 40 thou on the outside and 11 thou on the inside. These broken parts of the seal retainer aren't doing me any good. Of course, I placed an order earlier today for some other parts. I could have waited to include these. Man, this thing was nice when I got it less than a year ago. I'm using some water-based cleaner that is way harsher than the non-water-based stuff. It just rips the paint off of everything near it. Well, because nothing's ever easy, the parts washer puked all over the floor when I turned it on because the filter housing is split. Wonder if I forgot to drain that over the winter. Hopefully this isn't a proprietary ZEP size. I wonder if it's the same as a house water filter. Of course, not mine because the threads are opposite. Seems like most of the 10-inch filter housings have a male thread, and the ZEP one has a female thread. You can buy this from the OEM. Of course, it's going to be expensive. I found this pair on Amazon for less than half of what it would cost to buy just the one canister. Could change out this filter while I'm here. Moment of truth. So it looks like these new ones don't have a certain clearance for the threads to get started. Of course, the OEM had to make some proprietary stuff. Looks like it has a little bit of a step here that this doesn't have. I don't see why that matters though, because the threads then just start right after. The thread is ever so slightly different. Perfect. I guess I will have to use this piece. I already know that these screws don't fit in these holes. So any bets about whether these fittings will fit in these holes? Of course they don't. I drilled and tapped the plastic filter housing for 3/8 pipe thread. Hooked it up. At least it's working, but in terms of money and time spent, I should have just bought the factory ZEP housing. These seem like black parts to me. Thought I was going to be all slick today and get this cleaned up and have the whole thing reassembled. Then I realized the later 8 ends have the inner seal, and I need to replace that while I'm here, and I don't have one. That's the deepest seal in there, so that means I can't even install the backing plate or anything else. So I'm going to pull that out. I don't know if one of these will get in there. Yeah, maybe. This is not the way I really want to do this, but I'm just collapsing the metal part away from the edge. Got it. Angle pointed inward. This axle is going to be bathed in fluid in operation, but instead of just putting it in dry, I'll give it some special sauce. Could use grease. I'm using some moly paste. I'm just making it up as I go. Someone will probably tell me how I shouldn't do this. I'm not going to pack the bearings. I have rinsed them out. They're not liking this humid weather, so they're starting to get some surface rust. But I'm just going to put a little bit of moly on them as well. They also supposedly get lubed up by the tractor fluid, so I just don't want to put it in dry. That was a pretty solid sound. So here's a paper one, replacing the metal ones. This is already measuring it at 16 thou, maybe 15. So I only need one of these on my inside of my backing plate. Use more moly paste. I think that jack stand is going to be in the way. Let's put a couple of these in from the back side so I can hang it. Since I haven't moved the bearing on the axle, my preload hasn't changed. What has changed is the thickness of the gaskets, and I've got maybe a couple thou of paint on the backing plate now where there wasn't. I was supposed to have 10 thou shims inboard of the backing plate and 40 thou outboard. So what I'm saying is what used to be 50, I'm now going to try 48 of shims, so 16 and then 32. And a couple thou of paint, I should be roughly back where I was. Now I'd imagine that the previous bearing preload had been set with a few thou of wiggle room anyway. So I'm going to stick these down. And if it doesn't work, I'll take it apart. Long ones come in from the inside. Apparently I wasn't filming just now. I put the cork ring on the inside of that. Some guy on the internet says these are supposed to be 55 foot-pounds. And that's screwed up. And the spring is supposed to provide pressure against that. Wow, look how smooth that moves now. So what would happen if I tried to adjust that? Looks like it adjusts. I just like Molly on spline to joints. So I'm doing it. So since this is the axle, the original axle, got a smeared part in the thread that I don't like. I did buy another used axle that part's better, but the splines are worse. Rather than having to carefully check and adjust the bearing preload on that new axle, new to me axle, I'm gonna use my old one. I'm not gonna use the smeared nut that came off of it. I'm gonna use one of these repair nuts. The previous nut is just all one piece. This is actually split, so that when you tighten this external nut onto it, it clamps down harder. There's also this key that you drive into it, I guess. I'm just gonna see if I can thread it on here for now. Is it the same size as the original? Of course not. It's looking like right now, since I don't have the transmission top on and I can't put it in gear, I'm not going to be able to tighten it any more than this. Guess I'll have to put the wheel on. So these four that hold the drum on, I might as well just put them back on. I mean, the wheel really will be holding the drum on once you put the nuts on. Definitely going to put some anti-seize on them though. Should have put some anti-seize on the actual countersunk area. Just picked up this wheel and tire. It's currently set up to be a left side, but I'm gonna flip that wheel center around. I'm gonna use that wheel center too, since my other one was kind of rough, probably usable, but this one's in good shape. Wire wheeled all the bolts. Notice that there's a chamfer on both sides of these holes, so this can be flipped in or out. I could go for a super wide stance. the center is kind of aligned by the lugs. They have a chamfer on them. I'm making sure that the square of the carriage bolt head fits into the fairly square lug. So I haven't tightened up those 4 studs yet on the backing plate. Just remembered. Platter of failure right there. Need to get the 4 on the back, where it used to only be 2. I don't like stealing parts from one complete project to put on another, but since the 50 runs already, I think I'm going to take this wheel off of my 51. This tire is basically brand new, although it's been sitting out for probably 15 or 20 years. Need to actually use it before it completely dry rots. Someone's been in here before. You can see they've left their mark on these screws. I'll get to this tractor probably next, but for now I'm going to borrow that wheel and tire. I'm draining the tire because I'm sick of wheels rusting out. I understand the benefit of putting fluid in your tires, but wheels and tires are expensive. Now this tire is also pretty good, and that's on an original rim, but I think the inner tube is bad. This is the one off my 51. So the wheel center spacing, I didn't get the same on both sides, which I'm not concerned about. I didn't feel like doing it. On this side, obviously the rim loops are on the inside. On that side, they're on the outside. So it's going to be off a little bit. The last big item on the list is to flush the hydraulic system. I'm going to do that through the shift tower opening since I have that off. There's 3 drain plugs I need to pull. Well, a 20-pound egg bucket fits. I don't know if that'd be like the size of a 4-gallon bucket or something. It's supposed to be about 5 gallons of fluid. I'd say there was some water in there. Yum. So that's 1 of 3 still draining. See if I can pop the top on the other 2. That's the transmission. Then there's another big one on the hydraulic pump. And then there's a pipe plug on the rear end. Uh-oh. Doesn't look great. Looks like they had a homemade gasket on that one. I'd say that was just about 5 gallons. I think I'll at least replace 2 of them for now, so I can flush kind of one compartment at a time. Just some old diesel I've been using to clean parts with. Done the first 2 compartments. Now time for the rear end. Hopefully this will make it back there. Wish I could put 5 gallons in. On the next fluid change, I'm going to park somewhere where I can fit some 5-gallon buckets under there. I prefer to really just fill this stuff up a lot more to wash off anything on the sidewalls, but at least I'm getting the stuff off the bottom. I've done 3 or 4 passes on each one of the compartments. I'm going to pull all the plugs and just let it drain for a while, a couple hours. Well, I just invested an hour making these. I need to just buy the right gaskets. These aren't the same size as the engine drain plug. I've read that you should take out this bolt and fill it up until the fluid gets to that. Judging by the dipstick, that's about full, so ain't that convenient. Looks like it might have been leaking out of that hole anyway. That makes 5 gallons of the good stuff. I'm just gonna say that's enough because that's all I have. While I have this shift tower off, I want to disassemble it to thoroughly clean it because it's still pretty crusty. Not entirely sure what needs to be done. I'm assuming compressing that spring and pulling out some sort of pin, but I don't see one. Oh, it's just like a Model A transmission where it's like a collar. Shouldn't there be a slot? I'm gonna use my third hand here. There's the slot. Wonder if that's how it's supposed to look. Got some fireworks. Does this not come out? Okay. Does it? Okay. That was the wrong way to remove that. Man, this stuff is crusty. Is that the Facebook logo? probably a loose fit, but I'm not super concerned. Ooh. That was it. Looks like it has a little groove to sit down into. That's a pretty weak hex on there. It's probably supposed to be 1 inch. Well, I can't find my gasket for the top. That is incredibly annoying. And now here's the stupid part. Since I can't find that gasket, I'm going to have to take this off and put it back on. Probably shouldn't be doing this over an open transmission. This guy's been supervising me the whole time today. So, I still need to tighten this nut. Need to replace that gasket that is non-existent. I need to grease up the whole chassis. But I want to make a milestone today. Let's see what happens. If I can find second. Yeehaw! I'm out of gas. Okay, reverse. Reverse and second. I can tell I gotta tune the carburetor a little bit. Probably fatten it up. She's got an abrupt clutch on her. I have to adjust that. Sounds great when I got the clutch in. That transmission is pretty loud. Let's see what happens. Yeah, that's a lot faster. So I don't know if I've got a high and low or one or the other. If one's a direct and one's a high, or one's a low and one's a direct. So it runs and drives just fine if I've got it half choked, but when I let the choke all the way out, it just kind of burns up one gulp at a time and then runs out. So little bit of tuning, but that was the milestone I wanted to meet today. Something I should have paid attention to was removing this as part of the fluid draining. I'm guessing the PTO shaft can still spin inside of there if I turn it on, but I'll as well take it off. Probably full of rust and water. Yeah. Smells lovely. Let's see if the PTO turns. And I believe you have to have the PTO on to raise the 3-point. Wasn't lifting, and then when I lifted it up manually, it would just drop back down. I've spun the brake adjuster a few times around now, and let's see. That is, they're about even. Put in the back of my mind while I'm doing victory laps. Need to properly grease this thing. I've been driving it around with this fairly tight. I'm not going full torque since those threads are questionable. Just trying to see if the hub wants to shake loose. Of course, the internet is very little help on this. Everyone says, oh, don't use that, just replace your axle. You know what? I'm just gonna see what I can get away with. I'm gonna tighten this pretty tight. Then I'm just gonna keep an eye on it. Another thing I want to verify is what kind of Sherman I have. So if it's combo, I believe you have a forward, a back, and then if you put it in neutral, you can pull it out, and back will get you into standard gears. The fact that this comes out, I'm thinking it might be a combo. So you got back, forward, kind of halfway out. Probably need to be rolling. Okay, I'm out and back. I guess I can verify that. In, out, back. Let's see. Oh, that's pretty abrupt. Okay, medium, I don't know, pretty slow. Let's see. In, forward. That is either the same or a little bit slower. In and back all the way. That is definitely faster. I'm guessing I have a combo then. Nice. Very nice. So I don't know why I can't go into fourth. So first and third are one shift rail, reverse is another, and second and fourth is another. I can go into second. Ooh, now I can go into fourth. I'm in low. Oh yeah, that's nice. So I guess I had to work it a little bit to get the other half of that shift rail. It's going into four pretty good right now. These are the shift rail detents for 2-4 and on the other side reverse. I have the gasket for this now. I can get in here and free up that 1-3 shift rail. Okie dokie. Had a rock behind the wheel, but I guess it was not touching. This is the shaft that is likely stuck. So I'm not getting first and third. Okay, so it can go side to side, back and forth, TBD. It's only going to have a max movement of like 3/8. Yep, should have done this before I changed the fluids. This was my first one. I'll just making it up as I go. I'm forming a plan for my future ones. All right, so it is going back and forth fairly smoothly now. Probably need to be moving. Ooh, third. We have third. Second. Fourth. Reverse. First. Ooh, yeah. First, third. Very nice. That's an interesting shift pattern. You got 1, 2, 3, 4. Now I will have all 12 forward gears and 3 reverse. That's all I wanted to do with this video. The original detent spring is still springy, so I'm going to use it for now. The internet says to install it dry. I retightened that nut and set that lock washer. Make sure it still works. And it says to install it dry. This one is annoying. Rerouted this starter wire. Hopefully that's the last time it'll need to be messed with. Yeah. Every time. I removed, cleaned up, and replaced the sediment bowl. Used a little bit of liquid thread sealant on there. Don't want to use any tape on a fuel system. Hopefully it won't leak. Doesn't seem to be forming a drop or anything right now, so. I did put gas in it. Maybe it needs a vacuum of the engine running to fill that up. Yep, that's all it needed. Okay, now I would say it's stuck in third gear even though this is in neutral. So I need to take that top cover off again. Because it's in neutral. Well, the lever says it's in neutral. Great. I'll need to review the footage, but I'm thinking that I assembled it with it back like that. It should be like that. The detent fell in right there. Seems like neutral to me. And that's in gear. Possibly third or first. And so is that in gear. Let me try this again. Last time I said it'd be the last time. This time I'm going to say it's the third to last time. Okay, I got that out of third gear and I've reassembled it. I'd like to remind everyone that these videos are for entertainment only, not educational. Do not do what I do. I assume no responsibility. I'm ready to go now with hopefully all my gears. Okay, we're in neutral. We're in reverse. Very abrupt clutch. Let's see. First gear, first time. Oh yeah. Let's see. Second gear should still work. It does. Third gear, first time. She works. It's a nice speed. Thank you. Fourth gear. Oh boy, she wants to take off. That is a high gear. Woo dog. Alrighty. Oh yeah. Look at her go.